It comes to you at dawn, doesn't it? Before the world wakes, before the phone buzzes with the demands of the day. It slides into the space between your ribs, a familiar weight you've learned to carry like a second spine. You've named it everything: stress, failure, the mistake you made, the future you dread. But beneath all those names, it is simply the problem that won't let you go. You've tried to outrun it. You filled the hours with noise, light, and motion. You've swapped cities, swapped faces, swapped the very threads on your back, hoping that if you just moved fast enough, that shadow would lose your trail. But it is not a shadow, it is a hook. And it is buried deep in the fabric of your soul. We are taught to hate the grip of it. To see it as a curse, a glitch in the design. But the Prophet knew something we forget in our rushing, that the thing that holds you fast is often the only thing keeping you from falling into the abyss. It is not the enemy at your door, it is the throb in your chest that proves you are still alive. So, what if this persistent ache, this midnight whisper, is not a problem to be solved but a call to be answered? It won't let you go because it is leading you somewhere. It is turning your face from the horizon of your own plans to the sky of a greater will. You are not stuck, you are snagged. Snagged on the hem of the divine, so that you cannot wander off the path. Tonight, we stop fighting the hold. We stop asking for the weight to be lifted. Instead, we ask for the strength to stand, with the weight, upon the sacred ground where it no longer breaks us, but bends us low enough to finally see the steps we were always meant to take, the ghost in the room. It is the first thing you sense when the external noise fades, the moment the last guest leaves, the second you turn off the engine in the driveway and the silence rushes back in to fill the void. It does not announce itself with a slam or a shriek, it is far more insidious than that. It arrives as a faint pressure behind the eyes, a tightening in the chest that has become so familiar you almost mistake it for a natural rhythm. You know it by its fingerprints, the way it subtly alters the taste of your morning coffee, the way it slips between you and the person you love most, creating a distance that no amount of physical closeness can bridge. This is the problem that does not merely occupy your mind, it haunts the architecture of your being, a permanent resident who pays no rent but demands all your attention. We are masters of distraction, architects of elaborate schedules and relentless pursuits, yet none of our achievements seem to evict this tenant. You can stack promotions, collect accolades, and fill your calendar with triumphant milestones, and still, in the quiet aftermath of each victory, there it sits, unmoved and unimpressed, waiting for the celebration to end so it can resume its whisper. This is the ghost's genius. It does not compete with your joys, it simply outlasts them, reminding you that every peak is temporary and every valley is eternal. Many of us have made a tragic peace with this ghost, mistaking its persistence for punishment. We interpret its presence as evidence of our inadequacy, a scorecard of our failures, a sentence for sins we cannot quite name. We replay the scenarios, looking for an escape clause, a forgotten apology, a different decision that might have exorcised this spirit. But the more we wrestle with it, the more solid it becomes. The ghost feeds on our resistance, growing stronger with each attempt to reason it away, with each logical argument we construct against its existence. It knows our vulnerabilities, the exact frequency of our fears, and it plays them like a master musician, each note perfectly calibrated to make us flinch. We begin to organize our lives around it, building routines designed to avoid triggering its presence, navigating our days like a person tiptoeing past a sleeping giant, terrified of the moment it will stir. What if the ghost is not our enemy? What if this persistent presence is actually the most honest part of our existence, the part that refuses to be placated by the cheap sedatives of worldly success? It clings to us not to torment us, but because it recognizes something we have forgotten, that we were made for more than comfortable silences and easy resolutions. The problem that won't let you go is the very thing keeping you from becoming a hollow vessel, a person who has traded depth for convenience. It is the friction that polishes the stone, the sand that irritates the oyster into producing the pearl. We spend our energy trying to silence it, medicating it, intellectualizing it, when all along it was the only thing speaking truth into our deaf ears. The ghost stays because the lesson is not finished, the transformation is incomplete. It will remain a haunting until we stop running from its presence and start asking it the question we have always feared: what are you trying to show me that I am too afraid to see? Until we turn to face it fully, with the courage of one who knows that even the darkest specter dissolves under the light of unflinching attention, it will remain our constant companion, the shadow that proves the sun is still shining somewhere, even if we have forgotten how to look up. It is the great seduction of our age, the whispering promise that slips into every anxious thought: if you can just get away, if you can just change the scenery, the problem will lose its scent. We have built entire civilizations on this premise, crafting escapes so intricate, so seamless, that we have mistaken movement for progress and distraction for relief. You feel it when you scroll through your feed, seeking refuge in the glow of other people's lives, hoping their brightness will dim the ache in your own chest. You feel it when you plan that trip, that purchase, that promotion, convinced that the next horizon holds the key to your liberation. And yet, the problem sits beside you on the plane, waits for you in the hotel room, greets you the morning after the celebration, more patient than any companion you have ever known. It does not tire, it does not forget, and it most certainly does not respect the boundaries you draw around your attempts to flee. We have confused escape with solution because our age worships speed and despises stillness. To stand still before a problem, to let it press against you without recoiling, feels like defeat in a world that equates constant motion with vitality. So we run, not toward anything, but away from the weight that has chosen us. We run through relationships, shedding people as if they were garments that no longer fit, hoping that new faces will not reflect the old wounds. We run through careers, trading one set of pressures for another, convinced that the next title will finally silence the voice that questions our worth. We run through philosophies, consuming wisdom like fast food, swallowing whole systems of thought only to discard them when they demand more than we are willing to give. And all the while, the problem remains, not because it is cruel, but because it is honest. It refuses to be outrun because it knows what we have not yet accepted, that escape is not a solution, it is a postponement, and postponement is the slow poison of the soul. Consider the prisoner who dreams of freedom but carries the cell within his own mind. He may walk through open fields, breathe fresh air, feel the sun on his face, but the bars are still there, invisible and unyielding, because they were never made of iron. They were made of the very thing he refused to face. And so it is with the problem that has claimed you. You can change your postcode, your language, your very identity, but you cannot change the appointment that was written before you were born. The problem is not a circumstance, it is a curriculum. It has come to teach you something that no amount of running can reveal, because revelation requires standing still long enough to let the lesson enter. The prophet taught us that victory is not in avoiding the trial but in meeting it with a heart that has submitted to its necessity. He did not run when the stone was thrown, nor when the night grew dark, nor when the call required him to leave everything he knew. He walked forward, not away, and in that walking, he transformed the very ground beneath his feet. So we must ask ourselves, what are we truly running from? Is it the problem itself, or is it the self that the problem exposes? Because the problem has a way of peeling back our pretensions, revealing the fragile architecture of our confidence, the shaky foundations of our pride. It shows us that we are not as strong as we imagined, not as wise, not as in control. And that exposure is unbearable to the ego that craves invincibility. But the soul knows differently. The soul knows that exposure is the beginning of healing, that the wound cannot be treated while it is hidden beneath layers of gauze and denial. The soul knows that the path to freedom does not lead away from the problem but straight through its fiery center. When you stop running, you discover that the problem has not been chasing you all this time. It has been running alongside you, waiting for you to realize that the two of you were never enemies but reluctant companions on a journey that demands courage, patience, and the humility to accept that escape is not the answer, because there is nowhere to go that is not already held by the one who set this trial upon your path. We have been conditioned to see the problem as an adversary, a cosmic mistake, a glitch in the divine order that requires immediate correction. When it persists, when it refuses to yield to our prayers and our pleas, we interpret its endurance as abandonment, as evidence that we have been forgotten or punished. But what if the very opposite is true? What if the problem that refuses to release you is not a sign of divine distance but the very proof of divine proximity? Imagine a fisherman casting his line into the vastness of the ocean, not to harm the fish but to bring it closer, to pull it from the depths where it cannot breathe into the air where it can finally live. The hook is not cruelty, it is connection. And the problem that has sunk its hold into your spirit is precisely that hook, the divine hand that refuses to let you swim into the darkness of your own making. You feel it as an intrusion because you have forgotten that you were created to be held, and holding sometimes requires a grip that feels like a wound. Consider the story of the one who was sent to the lowest valley, who was tested beyond measure, who felt the weight of the entire world pressing upon his shoulders. Was that trial a sign of displeasure? The historians tell us otherwise. They tell us that the heaviest trials were reserved for the most beloved, that the depth of the test was a measure of the depth of the love. The problem that will not let you go is not a punishment, it is a selection. It is the divine choosing you for a station that cannot be reached by comfort or by ease. Comfort is the enemy of elevation, because comfort asks nothing of you, demands no growth, requires no surrender. But the problem, the persistent ache, the recurring failure, the loss that revisits you in your sleep, the fear that colors every decision, this is the hammer that shapes the metal, the fire that purifies the gold, the chisel that reveals the statue hidden within the block of marble. You are not being destroyed, you are being defined. And definition requires resistance, friction, the pressure of a tool against the surface of your soul. We must unlearn the notion that the divine owes us a smooth path, that faith is a guarantee of ease, that closeness to the source exempts us from struggle. The beloved ones throughout history were not spared, they were prepared. They faced the storm not because they were unloved but because they were being readied for a mission that demanded the strength only storms can forge. The problem that clings to you is the instructor you did not apply for, the teacher you would have avoided if you had known the curriculum. But the curriculum is not arbitrary, it is intimate, tailored, precisely designed for the unique shape of your soul. It knows your breaking point and it will not exceed it, though it will come dangerously close, because the goal is not to break you but to bend you toward a posture of reliance that you would never have discovered in your self-sufficiency. The hook is not dragging you down, it is tethering you to the dock so that the currents of your own impulses cannot sweep you away. When you wake in the night and the problem is there, wide awake, waiting, recognize that you are not alone in the room. The one who placed that weight upon your chest is also watching, closer than your jugular vein, more present than your own heartbeat. The problem is the veil that separates you from the illusion of control, and behind that veil is an intimacy you cannot access through any other door. The problem will not let you go because the divine will not let you go, because you are beloved, because you are chosen, because you are being drawn not toward destruction but toward a fulfillment that requires the very thing you have been resisting. And when you finally stop fighting the hook, when you surrender to its pull, you will find that it is not pulling you down at all, it is pulling you up, out of the shallow waters of your own design, into the vast ocean of a purpose you could never have imagined, a purpose that was written for you before the first star was placed in the sky, a purpose that the problem has been guarding all along, waiting for you to trust it enough to let it carry you home. We are obsessed with removal, with extraction, with the surgical excision of anything that causes us discomfort. We approach the problem as a surgeon approaches a tumor, scalpel in hand, desperate to cut it out and throw it away so that we can return to our previous state of wholeness. But this is the great miscalculation, the tragic error that keeps us circling the same pain without ever finding the exit. The problem is not a tumor to be removed, it is a weight to be carried, and the carrying is not the obstacle to your transformation, it is the transformation itself. Consider the stone that the builder rejects, the one that seems too heavy, too awkward, too irregular to fit into the wall. It lies in the mud, dismissed and forgotten, until the architect arrives and sees what no one else could see, that this stone, with all its rough edges and impossible weight, is the keystone, the very piece upon which the entire arch depends. Without it, the structure collapses. With it, the gate stands firm against every storm. You have been treating your problem as an error of construction, but what if it is the keystone of your becoming? What if the very thing you have been trying to discard is the one thing that holds your destiny together? The weight you carry is not arbitrary, it is precisely calibrated to your capacity, a measure that the one who knows you better than you know yourself has determined with infinite precision. You feel the strain, the ache in your shoulders, the fatigue in your limbs, and you interpret this as a sign that you were never meant to bear such a load. But the strain is the signal of growth, the ache is the announcement of expansion, the fatigue is the evidence that you are being stretched beyond your former limits into a new dimension of being. The muscles of the spirit grow only under resistance, and the weight you despise is the very thing that is forging the strength you will need for what lies ahead. You cannot prepare for the future with the body of the past, you must be rebuilt, and rebuilding requires the hammer and the anvil, the fire and the stone. The prophets and the righteous ones did not ask for the removal of their burdens, they asked for the strength to bear them. This is the turning of the stone, the moment when the prayer shifts from, "Take this away from me," to, "Give me what I need to carry it." It is a subtle shift, but it changes everything. Because when you stop trying to drop the weight, you stop exhausting yourself in a battle you cannot win, and you begin to channel that energy into standing upright beneath it. You discover that the weight, once accepted, becomes a source of stability rather than instability. It anchors you when the winds of doubt blow, roots you when the floods of anxiety rise. The problem that you thought was pulling you down is actually holding you steady, preventing you from being swept away by every passing current of circumstance. It is the gravity that keeps you grounded, the ballast that keeps your ship from capsizing in the storm. There is a secret hidden in the carrying that the world does not understand, a mystery that reveals itself only to those who have stopped fighting the load. When you carry the problem with acceptance, with patience, with the quiet conviction that this weight has been placed upon you by a hand that loves you, the weight begins to change you from the inside out. It reshapes your posture, reorients your gaze, refines your priorities. You stop caring about the trivialities that once consumed you because you have no energy for them. The weight has purified your focus, burning away the dross of distraction until only what truly matters remains. The problem becomes your teacher, your companion, your compass. It directs your steps because you cannot walk as you once walked. You must walk deliberately, carefully, with full awareness of every step. And that awareness is the door to presence, and presence is the door to the divine. You are not carrying the problem is carrying you, slowly, painfully, beautifully, toward the shore you could never have reached on your own, the shore where you will finally understand that the weight was never a punishment but a passage, and the carrying was always the prayer, and then, in a moment that arrives without warning, the shift occurs. It is not dramatic, not accompanied by trumpets or flashes of light. It is quieter than that, softer, like the first crack of dawn that you almost miss if you are not paying attention. The problem that has haunted you, that has pursued you through every city and every silence, that has sat beside you in every empty room, suddenly looks different. It has not changed, you have changed. The angle of your vision has tilted, and where you once saw only a monster, you now see a guide. This is the shift, the moment when the enemy transforms into the teacher, when the weight becomes the wings, when the chain becomes the key. It is the most disorienting and liberating experience of the human journey, because it overturns everything you thought you knew about your suffering. You spent years praying for the problem to leave, and now, in this strange new light, you find yourself almost grateful for its presence, almost protective of its role in your life. You realize that the problem was never working against you, it was working for you, in ways you could not comprehend until you had been broken open enough to receive its gift. The shift does not come from reasoning your way out of the pain, it comes from surrendering to the purpose within the pain. You stop asking, why me, and start asking, what now? You stop demanding an explanation and start seeking the instruction. The problem becomes a sacred text, a scripture written in the ink of your own tears, and you begin to read it not as a curse but as a revelation. Every sleepless night, every moment of despair, every setback and disappointment, these were not random, they were verses, carefully composed, leading you toward a meaning that could only be accessed through the very experience you were trying to escape. The shift is the recognition that your suffering has a signature, a fingerprint that belongs uniquely to you, and that this signature is the key to your purpose. No one else could carry this particular weight in this particular way. No one else could learn what this problem is teaching you because no one else has your history, your sensitivities, your specific capacity for growth. The problem chose you because you were the only one who could transform it into wisdom. And in the shift, you discover that the problem has been your most faithful companion, more loyal than any friend, more persistent than any lover. It never abandoned you, never grew bored, never stopped pushing you toward the edge of your potential. It was the force that kept you from settling, the friction that prevented you from becoming complacent, the irritation that forced you to produce the pearl. You begin to see that the problem was not a detour from your path, it was your path. The path you thought you were supposed to walk, the smooth road of ease and achievement, that was the illusion. The real path was always this one, rocky and steep and strewn with obstacles, because the real path is the one that leads to the summit, and the summit is not reached through comfort but through struggle. The problem was the trail marker, the signpost that kept you from wandering into the wilderness of meaninglessness. It held you, frustrated you, challenged you, until you had no choice but to grow beyond the person you had been. Now, when the problem rises to meet you, you do not recoil. You recognize it as an old friend, a familiar presence that has walked with you through the darkest valleys. You have learned to read its language, to understand its gestures, to trust its timing. It no longer terrifies you because you know its purpose, it no longer defeats you because you have seen what it produces. You carry it with a new posture, not slumped under the weight but lifted by the meaning of it. And in this carrying, you find that the problem has become a source of light, illuminating the path ahead, showing you where to step, where to pause, where to rest. It has become the very thing that guides you to the door you were always meant to enter, the door that leads to a version of yourself you could never have imagined, a version that is stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more alive, because it was forged in the fire of the problem that refused to let you go. And you realize, at last, that the problem was not your obstacle, it was your opening, and through that opening, you have finally stepped into the life that was waiting for you all along.